You are listening to Bedtime Dreamy Tales. Subscribe to our channel for new story. Story title, The Witch and Her Servants. Long ago, in a kingdom where magic and wonder were part of everyday life, there lived a wise and noble king who had 3 sons. The eldest, Szabo, the middle son, Warza, and the youngest, Iwanich. One beautiful spring morning, the king took his sons for a walk through his splendid gardens. As they wandered, admiring the various fruit trees, they came upon a piece of wasteland where 3 magnificent trees stood. The king paused and looked at the trees with a sorrowful expression, then continued walking in silence. Curious and concerned, the 3 princes asked their father why the sight of such splendid trees made him sad. The king sighed and began to tell them the story. These 3 trees were planted by me when I was just 20 years old. A celebrated magician had given the seeds to my father, promising that they would grow into the finest trees the world had ever seen. My father did not live to see this promise fulfilled, and on his deathbed, he made me promise to care for these trees with the utmost attention. The king went on to explain that after 5 years, the trees began to blossom and bear the most exquisite fruit. He gave strict orders to his head gardener to watch over the trees, for the magician had warned that if even one unripe fruit was plucked, all the rest would rot immediately. The fruit would only be ripe when it turned a golden yellow. One night, the king dreamt of eating the ripe fruit, which was more delicious than anything he had ever tasted. Upon waking, he eagerly asked the gardener if the fruit had ripened overnight. The gardener, however, threw himself at the king's feet and swore that he had watched the trees all night. But somehow, as if by magic, the beautiful fruit had been stolen. The king did not punish the gardener, but decided to pick the fruit himself the following year before it was fully ripe. Unfortunately, the apples were bitter and unpleasant, and the next morning, the rest of the fruit had rotted away. Despite the king's efforts to guard the trees with his most loyal servants, the fruit was stolen every year on the same night. When the king finished his story, Szabo, the eldest son, declared that he would guard the trees himself that very night. The king agreed, and Szabo climbed one of the trees as evening fell, determined to protect the fruit. However, just after midnight, he was overcome by an irresistible drowsiness and fell asleep. By morning, all the fruit was gone. The following year, Warza, the second brother, tried his luck, but with the same result. Finally, it was Iwanich's turn. Though younger and less strong than his brothers, Iwanich was undeterred. As night fell, he climbed one of the trees. The moon lit up the surroundings, allowing him to see everything clearly. At midnight, a gentle west wind shook the tree, and a snow-white, swan-like bird descended gently onto his chest. Iwanich quickly seized the bird's wings, only to find himself holding the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. "Fear not, Militza," said the girl with kind eyes. She explained that an evil magician had stolen the seed from her mother, leading to her death. Her mother had made her promise to take the fruit each year as soon as it ripened, as the king had no rightful claim to it. This spell had now been broken by Iwanich's touch. Iwanich, expecting to face a terrifying magician, was captivated by Militza's beauty. They spent the night talking, and by dawn, Militza had given Iwanich a sparkling diamond ring, promising it would guide him to her kingdom if he truly loved her. With that, Militza vanished into a white cloud. Iwanich, enchanted by Militza and determined to find her, returned to the palace without checking the trees. The head gardener soon discovered the trees were laden with ripe fruit, and the king was overjoyed. He praised Iwanich, who told him a fabricated story about fighting off a huge wasp. While the kingdom celebrated, Iwanich secretly took some gold and the swiftest horse from the royal stable, setting off on a journey guided by Militza's ring. Iwanich's journey was long and filled with challenges. For 3 months, he traveled through forests, over mountains, and across rivers, guided by the shimmering light of Militza's ring. One day, he reached the entrance of a vast forest that seemed untouched by human feet. As he prepared to enter, an old, gaunt man, leaning on a crooked staff, called out to him. "Hold, youth! Whither are you going?" the man asked. Iwanich explained his quest, and the old man warned him of the fierce tigers, hyenas, wolves, bears, and snakes that inhabited the forest. He advised Iwanich to take a different path to save his life. However, Iwanich, trusting the guidance of Militza's ring, insisted on continuing. The old man, seeing Iwanich's determination, offered him a bag of breadcrumbs and a live hare. He explained that when the wild beasts surrounded him, Iwanich should scatter the breadcrumbs to distract them and then release the hare, which they would chase, allowing him to pass safely. Grateful for the advice, Iwanich took the bag and the hare, leaving his horse behind as the old man suggested. As he ventured into the forest, growls and snarls soon surrounded him. He quickly scattered the breadcrumbs, and as the last crumb was eaten, he released the hare. The beasts chased after it, and Iwanich continued his journey unscathed. Deeper into the forest, he encountered a peculiar, 3-foot-tall man with prickles like a hedgehog all over his body, accompanied by 2 lions. The man, who turned out to be the guardian of the forest, thanked Iwanich for feeding his beasts and offered one of his lions as a protector. With the lion by his side, Iwanich journeyed through the forest, the wild animals keeping a respectful distance. At last, he reached the edge of the forest and bid farewell to the lion, continuing on foot to a distant, gleaming palace. Iwanich found himself on a vast plain, and after resting for the night, he headed toward a beautiful white palace. Upon entering, he wandered through magnificent halls until he reached a garden where he saw Militza surrounded by her maidens. Overjoyed, they embraced, and Iwanich recounted his adventures. They lived happily for 3 months, but one day, Militza received an invitation from her aunt, the witch Corva, who lived in a far-off land. Though saddened, Militza promised to return in 7 days and handed Iwanich the keys to the palace, warning him not to open the little iron door in the north tower. For 2 days, Iwanich resisted the temptation, but on the 3rd day, curiosity got the better of him. He unlocked the door and found a room with a boiling cauldron and a man chained inside, writhing in agony. The man begged Iwanich for relief, and out of pity, Iwanich fetched water and poured it over him. Instantly, the palace crumbled around him, and Iwanich found himself alone on a desolate heath. Realizing his mistake, he wandered aimlessly until he saw a light from a small hut. The owner was the kind old man who had given him the breadcrumbs and hare. Not recognizing Iwanich, he gave him shelter. The next morning, the old man suggested that Iwanich seek work with the witch Corva. After following the stream for 3 hours, Iwanich arrived at Corva's dreary, skull-adorned home and offered his services. The witch tasked him with caring for a mare and her foal for a year, warning that failure would result in his head being added to her fence. For months, Iwanich successfully watched over the horses. He earned the gratitude of a fish, an eagle, and a fox by helping them, each gifting him a scale, a feather, and 2 hares respectively, to summon their aid in times of need. As the year neared its end, Corva tried to thwart Iwanich by using magic to make him fall asleep while the horses hid in various places. Each time, Iwanich used the gifts from the animals to retrieve the horses. First, the fish drove them from the river, then the eagle retrieved them from the clouds, and finally, the fox helped him find them in the king's henhouse. The mare, grateful for Iwanich's persistence, advised him to request her foal as his reward, despite Corva's attempts to dissuade him. When the witch reluctantly agreed, she revealed that the man Iwanich had freed was a powerful magician who had captured Militza. Only Iwanich could defeat him. Armed with this knowledge, Iwanich mounted the foal, which could travel at incredible speed, and set off to rescue Militza. They flew through the air, and by nightfall, Iwanich saw the magician and his friends in a carriage drawn by owls. The magician tried to greet Iwanich, but remembering Corva's warning, Iwanich seized him by the beard and threw him to the ground. The foal then trampled the magician to death. In an instant, Iwanich found himself back in Militza's palace. Militza ran to him, and they embraced, knowing they were finally free from the magician's evil. They lived in peace and happiness, and the story of their love and bravery was told throughout the kingdom for generations to come. If you like this story, please give this video a like. For more stories, go to bedtimedreamytales.com. See you in the next story.